What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. We have a lot to discuss in this weekend update here as we are getting into what is most likely going to be a very eventful week in the markets this upcoming week. We're going to be covering a little bit of what's been developing on the macro front here. We saw a lot of volatility last week and kind of covering some of the main points from the biggest event of last week, the Jackson Hole Symposium, which we got some interesting comments from Jerome Powell on Friday. Now, in addition to this, we're also, as always, going to be covering some of your favorite names here: Neo, Palantir, Sofi, and HIMS, covering the most relevant and up-to-date pieces of news, as well as the charts here to give you guys a better understanding of what to expect in the short term. So, before we get into all of that information, guys, if you guys do enjoy the information and analysis that I provide for you guys in these videos here, make sure you go down and hit that like button. It costs you nothing to do it, but it helps me out a whole lot in spreading this information out to as many people who actually want to learn. And again, if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you guys are, and turn on notifications so you're notified every time these videos do end up getting posted live. And as always, massive shout out to all of the members of my private trading and investing community, Less Trades, More Profits. I'm going to throw up some of the gain screenshots over here. I mean, I had a really good day on Friday, making over $10,000 there. Really solid day for me, but it is absolutely awesome seeing all of you guys consistently hitting these 1000% trades that I just keep handing out to everybody. I've said it before, I will say it again. I am just going to keep coming out here, guys, handing these epic trades out. Are you going to keep missing them? I don't know. I know it's pretty crazy seeing all of these trades here continuously firing off multi-100%, multi-1000% trades. And again, some of you guys might know this, YouTube doesn't even like when I talk about those results there. I'm the only person that you guys know on social media here that is literally demonetized for talking about how many 1000% trades that they hand out to their community with proof of all of them. So remember, prices of LTMP are going to be significantly increasing at the end of the month. If you guys want to lock in the lower rate and get 50% off your first month, use code August with that link down below. Again, you get access to all the full-length course curriculum videos, the Day Trading Mastery course and the Swing Kings course, the full watch list of stocks and cryptos that are about to explode before they do, the daily private live streams, the macro research reports, the pre-market plans, the single stock research reports. Again, guys, I run this community a little bit differently than you will see a lot of these other communities being run, and that is exactly why everybody in there is able to have so much more success than in a lot of these other groups. So we'd love to have you in there, but without further ado, let's get right into it. So with Jackson Hole, we did kind of see a lot of volatility and, quite honestly, a lot of unwarranted fear, in my opinion, going into Friday. If you guys heard my kind of tone on the streams throughout this week, it was kind of very sarcastic when we were looking at these big moves to the downside in the market, because when you actually understand what's happening in the big picture here, looking at all of the key pieces of economic data, and then also looking at what these FOMC members, including Jerome Powell, have been saying over the last few months here, there really wasn't a possibility for them to come out and just completely 180 on all of the thoughts that they had already been giving out. So it was really likely that we were going to see a pretty neutral Powell, and maybe even coming out on the dovish side, and that's exactly what we saw. Powell indicates conditions may warrant interest rate cuts as Fed proceeds carefully, but coming over here and looking at some of these comments from WikiLeaks, Powell cautiously tees up an interest rate cut. The balance of risks appears to be shifting. While labor markets remain in balance, it is a curious kind of balance that results from a marked slowing in both the supply of and demand for workers. This unusual situation suggests that downside risks to employment are rising, and if those risks materialize, they can do so quickly in the form of sharply higher layoffs and rising unemployment. So what we're hearing from Powell and some of the other FOMC members now is that they are starting to put a little bit of a higher emphasis on unemployment and the labor market as a whole. But why is that? Well, it all is going to come back to that demand argument that I have been talking about with you guys all year as it relates to inflation. If we start to see unemployment starting to go up, remember, we already have a relatively weak consumer. If prices are going to go up in general here, well, there's not going to be enough demand for these from these consumers in order to kind of meet those higher prices, which is going to end up shrinking margins and end up slowing down growth, and again, kind of getting through this logical these steps here that would lead to a higher likelihood of interest rate cuts coming in the near future. Then we also saw this very interesting statement as well. Powell said that the Fed has adopted a new framework that removes a reference to the central bank seeking inflation that averages 2% over time, and one to it making decisions on employment based on shortfalls from its maximum level. So the unemployment data and employment data is going to be what the Fed is really going to be looking at going forward here, as well as some of the different kind of one-time price increases that we could see as a result from these tariffs here. So in general, Powell wasn't necessarily overly dovish at Jackson Hole, but the market was expecting him to be very hawkish. So when you see Powell come out kind of neutral and a little bit dovish, obviously we are going to see the market kind of deprice or unprice all of that uncertainty that it was during the earlier that week there. So let's get into some of these individual names here, guys. Start talking about some of the absolutely epic ones. I know that you guys saw this absolutely epic call that I gave you guys on NEO on this weekly breakout. I mean, I gave you guys that SoFi weekly breakout at 1360. The NEO weekly breakout over here was right at 501, and that is where one of the 1000% trades from over this last month have come from. So when we look at this daily chart on NEO, we are seeing, again, an obviously really, really strong setup here on NEO, bouncing off the 200 EMA, still hanging out in a very, very nice flag here. But when we take a look at this chart on the weekly, we have an absolutely textbook setup here that we love to trade in LTMP. We saw that break of 501, an absolutely epic move to the upside. A lot of you guys have been making serious money on this NEO idea here. And we've run through a lot of these profit targets already. Now, we do have earnings coming up, so if any of you guys still have some of these short-dated NEO positions here, again, the smart move is to continuously trim into this strength, with that final target in the short term here being at about $7.71. Now, some of the most interesting pieces of news with NEO coming out are obviously surrounding the Onvo model and the Onvo sub-brand and the models coming out with that, the Firefly expansion, but we also see some interesting developments and kind of analysis coming out of Deutsche Bank here, and we see that they expect the NEO ES8 sales to average around 3,000 units per month on competitive pricing. If achieved, this would mean that ES8 monthly sales could return to historical highs for a considerable period of time, and that would obviously be very, very bullish for NEO in the short, in medium, and long term. Now, moving on a little bit, let's talk about another one of retail's favorite names here, and that is Palantir. So again, looking at this chart here, we do have a little bit of a sign of a short-term bottom here in this chart after we saw a pretty significant pullback here in Palantir from the upper 180s all the way down into the lower 140s. But what I would say here is, again, we still have to be a little bit cautious in the short term. We are starting to set up a little bit of a bear flag here on the daily, which again isn't the end of the world here, but we would really need to see Palantir snap back above this daily 10 exponential moving average here, which is currently sitting at around 166, in order to make sure and give the market and investors a good understanding that this one is ready to start pushing back to the upside. So again, like I've been saying before, this is not one that you buy in the short term here, but it's definitely not one that you want to go out and short. But looking at some of the most up-to-date pieces of news here, again, you can think however you want about this, but ICE is going to be using Immigration OS by Palantir, new AI system to track immigrants' movements. Again, this is just another contract that Palantir is receiving. ICE is going to be paying Palantir $30 million for the platform. So this is really the only kind of new contract that I've seen with Palantir over the last week. There might have been a few more, but this was really kind of the only relatively sizable one that Palantir had received. Now, let's move on here, start talking a little bit about SoFi. SoFi, again, guys, this is one that I gave out to the LTMP community here at $6.55 last year. We are currently sitting at over $25 a share. That is absolutely unbelievable results in a little bit over a year's time in this name. Now, looking at this chart here, I want to actually pull this up on the weekly because we've seen a lot of noise here on the daily time frame. Again, during that earnings week, we did have a lot of volatility here, but this one is showing a lot of very strong signs and positive signs that this wants to get up into the upper 20s and lower 30 area, especially if the overall market is able to hold on here. So again, shout out to all of you guys that have been kind of sticking through all the volatility that we've seen out of SoFi over the last kind of year and a half, 2 years here. I mean, we we really nailed that entry in LTMP, which again, you guys really shouldn't be surprised at this point, with all those 1000%ers and all of those epic medium to long-term, mid to long-term investments that I've handed out to everybody. But again, this one is looking very, very solid here. I don't really plan on doing anything with my SoFi position in the short term here. Again, you want to always be thesis driven with your investments. There's a lot of people that keep coming into my streams and asking about price targets. I think price targets, whether it's coming from analysts or whether it's coming from somebody like me on social media or anybody else on Twitter, are pretty meaningless. They don't help anybody, and what you really should be focusing in on is the actual factors that are going to be driving price action, and be thesis driven and understand, okay, this is what's happening with the company. If they're able to execute on XYZ, they should be able to continue moving to the upside. And if that thesis is broken, that is really the only time that you need to be taking action in the market. Now, the last name that I want to talk about with you guys here too is HIMS. So earlier this week, I believe it was on Thursday, I was outlining to the LTMP group that this is now that first kind of chance here that if you wanted to initiate a position in HIMS, it's not the worst idea in the world. You are starting to consolidate right at this prior level of support here. You are bouncing right off that 200 exponential moving average, and as we've seen time and time again out of HIMS over the last couple of years here, that it does like to respect this daily 200 EMA. But again, obviously, since this is kind of that first instance where HIMS could be a decent buy opportunity here, we would also have to be worried about a potential break to the downside here off of this kind of bear flag setup here in moving back towards, let's say, this 38 area and maybe those low 30s if the market is not able to continue higher after what we have seen at Jackson Hole. But again, I think kind of going back to what we talked about earlier in this video here, what we've seen out of Powell in the overall Fed is they are okay with a little bit of inflation or an increase to inflation as long as growth in general is not going to get sacrificed, which is exactly why they are so focused in on the labor market right now. So this whole run it hot narrative on the growth front is in full swing and just keeps getting confirmed time and time again. So it does look like the market is setting up for a nice move into Nvidia's earnings coming up in a few weeks here. And also, or I believe that's next week, I think. I'd have to check on that. Let's actually check on that right now because Nvidia's earnings are coming up. Yeah, Wednesday the 27th here into Nvidia's earnings. And then we have that FOMC meeting coming up in September where a lot of market participants are expecting that first interest rate cut. So guys, that is going to wrap up this video here. If you guys did enjoy the information and analysis that I provided for you guys in this one, make sure you go down and hit that like button. Costs you nothing to do it, but it helps me out a whole lot in spreading this information out to as many people who actually want to learn. Remember, I'm not monetized on YouTube here, guys. It's from all of the multi-1000% trades that I love to talk about, me hitting and my private trading and investing community hitting here. So I really want to make sure that you guys have the best information to go into the market every single day and every single week so that you guys can make better decisions. So again, make sure you guys drop some likes on this video. Make sure you're subscribed. But until next time, guys, I will see you. Peace.